Attempting to describe and relate the human experience has long been a social, mental, physical, and spiritual tradition as old as time itself. The stories mankind has invented have helped shape and explain what it means to be human in the most metaphysical sense. Dating as far back as the period of prehistory, man has sought to relate his experience in personhood to others. Over the course of time, our stories have been told through art, oral tradition, and written word. And in due course, these stories have become much more than mere narratives. They've become myths. In understanding myth, it's essential that one views myth as purely a human construct, and therefore myth has no precise connection to anything beyond what the human mind intended. And so the essence of all myth then is the same, regardless of origin, narrative, or purpose. So then what purpose does myth serve in our lives? Myth's purpose can be seen in a variety of ways, including to provide a pseudo-scientific explanation, explaining the origins of something metaphysical, offering advice or warning, giving comfort on life's journey, or combining reality and fantasy to offer hope. It should be noted that one's foundation may include several building blocks, and so an individual's self-conception and social awareness can be compromised by parallels and intersecting functions of nature and social upbringing. One should also bear in mind when understanding myth that the old debate of nature versus nurture can compromise a person's understanding and incorporation of myth into one's perception of the world. There are several types of myth, among them creation. Layered into creation myths is a dichotomous nature, and because myths seek to educate and relate humanity through storytelling, its nature is to show both sides of the proverbial coin. In this way, myth attempts to be fair and just so that all points of view can be taken into account, and this is partly why myth is so helpful to humanity. Keeping this in mind, our study begins with the understanding of looking underneath the umbrella of creation myth, and our focus then will be on two subcategories of creation myth, charter and emergence. Our story begins by looking at Plato's allegory of the cave and using this myth as a catalyst of understanding mythological universality within Plato's myth of and the Zuni myth, the emergence. Plato was a 5th and 6th century philosopher. Having been a student of Socrates, he was well known in his day as having been an avid thinker, but also a tremendous writer. Within his best-known book, The Republic, Plato is now going to help us best understand creation myth in two of his well-known tales, beginning first with the allegory of the cave. A fascinating tale of men who have been chained up against a wall, only being able to see the objects that are cast by the puppeteers behind them. The objects that they have been seen have been the only reality these men have ever known. One might wonder why they never just walked out of the cave to see what lied beyond. They were never given the opportunity, however, because they were chained. However, on one fateful day, they're allowed to leave the cave, and in doing so, can now witness a world full of light and actual objects. Plato helps us best understand this by comparing the two worlds here and understanding them as shapes and forms. The shapes are best understood as having been the illusion, the shadows that these men had seen. One might otherwise understand these as having been the profane objects within the world, things that are tangible, however, are not necessarily what they really could be. On the flip side, we have the forms. These are the things that laid beyond the walls of the cave. Plato helps us best understand by explaining these as having been the reality. We might otherwise call these sacred objects. These sacred objects, while not necessarily tangible, again relate to Plato because Plato described these intangible objects, or the sacred objects, as having been things like truth and goodness. These are some of the prominent features within the Republic. Transitioning by being able to look at Plato's next topic, the myth of we can next understand another type of creation myth, that of charter myth. Within the myth of we find a very unique warrior named He's been dead now for 10 days. But interestingly, his body has not decomposed. Even better, on the 12th day, is resurrected. Having been given the chance by the gods to come back to humanity and explain what lies beyond this other world, he comes to help better explain to people what lies within that day of judgment. And what he begins to explain is that judges, a panel of judges really, are going to now pass on their opinions of people and what they did within their lives. Based on those actions, they're sent to a proverbial hell or a proverbial heaven. The point of this charter myth is to help us understand that in transcending one world to the other, we can take away a message, one of hope. Transitioning to now our third myth, the Zuni myth, we understand yet another type of myth, that of emergence. Another fascinating tale of men traveling from one world to the next. We're introduced to a set of brothers, ones that live in the light, who've been living in a fourth world. However, this may allude to the fact that there had been previous worlds, a third, second, and first, and that's actually the case. There's another set of brothers, the two are related, and in the first world, this is where the brothers of darkness live. They're quite different from their light brothers. In fact, these brothers have very similar and yet different characteristics. While the two are related, and the two will eventually become much more similar than they are different, the brothers have very uncharacteristic human qualities. No mouths, no exits, no hands, no feet. And as a result, when the fourth brothers enter the first world in order to bring their brothers into the world of the light, they're going to have to travel through a series of darkened worlds. This creates some trouble, but in finally getting to the lighted world, they're able to see that their dark brothers are in need of much help. This emergence myth teaches us that there is much to say about universality within myth. The universality of myth lies within its commonalities. In our study of creation myth, we've taken a look at creation myth as an umbrella, but also subcategories, that of charter myth and emergence myth. Perhaps what binds these all together are the things that unify them, common elements, archetypal images throughout these stories. Whether it's childhood, adulthood, location, light, dark, power and control, or even a message of hope. We find that these universal elements create archetypal images, and it is these images that make myth so helpful to humanity. Regardless of what the myth is, its intended purpose, the story itself, its origin, or location. The purpose of myth is to unify us as a human race. The purpose of myth is to help us better understand each other and ourselves. These common bonds, whether it's through story, art, or even writing, help us better tell our story now and in the future. And so this cycle of myth is ultimately the absolute universal.